3 facts about cowboys that will change how you see American history. First, up to 25% were Black Americans. Second, they worked 20-hour days for just $25 to $40 monthly. Third, their entire way of life was deliberately ended by wealthy landowners and corporations. The American cowboy you think you know is largely fiction. In the next few minutes, I'll reveal the real history behind this national symbol. From the Mexican vaqueros who created cowboy culture to the economic forces that first exploited and then mythologized these workers. The truth might surprise you.
The forgotten diversity. Who really wore the cowboy hat?
What if I told you that John Wayne and Clint Eastwood have been misleading you your entire life? The real American West looked nothing like what Hollywood shows. Every time we see cowboys in films, they're almost always portrayed by white actors, rugged men with steely gazes and perfect aim. But this idealized version completely misrepresents the true diversity that defined the American frontier. The historical reality is far more colorful than the black and white films that shaped our collective imagination. When we look at the actual demographic makeup of cowboys in the 19th century American West, the numbers tell a striking story. Around 15% of cowboys were of Mexican descent, and some research suggests that during the late 1800s, as many as 1 in every 3 cowboys was a Mexican vaquero. Up to a quarter of cowboys were Black Americans, with many others being Native Americans. This multicultural workforce stands in stark contrast to the whitewashed portrayal we've grown accustomed to. The very foundation of American cowboy culture has Mexican roots that run deep. Even the term cowboy itself evolved from the Spanish word vaquero, a person who manages cattle on horseback. This linguistic heritage is just the beginning. The techniques that defined cowboy work, from roping methods to cattle herding strategies, were perfected by Mexican vaqueros long before Anglo-Americans adopted them. The essential equipment that we associate with cowboys, the distinctive saddles, spurs, lariats, and even branding irons, all originated from Mexican ranching traditions that Anglo-cowboys later embraced and adapted. After the Civil War ended, thousands of former slaves saw the Western frontier as an opportunity for a new beginning. These Black Americans found in cowboy life a measure of freedom and independence that wasn't available elsewhere, despite the persistent discrimination they faced. The open range offered a unique environment where skill often mattered more than skin color, though racial prejudices certainly didn't disappear entirely. Among these Black cowboys, remarkable individuals left their mark on history, though their stories have been largely overlooked. Nat Love, known by his nickname Deadwood Dick, documented his fascinating experiences through his autobiography, providing us with rare first-hand insights into the diverse realities of cowboy life. Another extraordinary figure was Bill Pickett, who invented the technique of bulldogging, wrestling cattle to the ground, a skill that revolutionized certain ranching practices. Then there was Cherokee Bill, who lived a complex life that blurred the lines between cowboy and outlaw, challenging our simplified notions of frontier justice. So why have these diverse contributions been systematically erased from our cultural memory? When Hollywood began crafting Western films, it deliberately centered white male heroes while pushing everyone else to the margins or out of the frame entirely. This wasn't mere oversight. It reflected broader patterns of historical whitewashing in American narratives. The cowboy became not just an occupation, but a mythological figure representing American ideals of independence and masculinity, ideals that the entertainment industry and wider society were reluctant to associate with non-white Americans.
Hard labor, harsh reality, the brutal life behind the myth.
Behind that mythological figure of American independence was a man who slept in the dirt, ate dust for days, and faced death daily, all for less pay than a factory worker. When we strip away the romantic image crafted by decades of Hollywood movies, what emerges is a stark reality of exploitation and grueling labor conditions that would shock modern sensibilities. The daily routine of a real cowboy would crush the spirit of most people today. During cattle drives, these men worked up to 20 hours a day under the scorching sun or freezing rain. There was no clocking out, no weekends, and certainly no vacation days. Think about it. 20 hours of physical labor while managing unpredictable animals weighing hundreds of pounds each. These weren't short-term assignments either. Cattle drives often lasted months, with cowboys having virtually no contact with the outside world. Death lurked around every corner. Stampedes could erupt without warning, transforming docile cattle into a crushing wave of horns and hooves capable of killing men in seconds. Cowboys had to remain vigilant against predators that threatened both them and their herds. One small mistake could mean a fatal injury, with no hospitals or medical care for hundreds of miles. The hierarchy of cattle drives reveals how structured and regimented cowboy work actually was. Nothing like the lone wolf image we've been sold. Each drive had a clear chain of command. The trail boss planned routes and managed the crew, point riders guided the herd's direction, and swing and flank riders maintained formation along the sides. At the very bottom were the drag riders, who literally ate the dust, kicked up by thousands of cattle hooves all day, every day. These weren't free-spirited adventurers. They were cogs in a highly organized system designed to move product efficiently. Even their living conditions were far from glamorous. When lucky enough to stay on ranches, cowboys shared communal bunkhouses, essentially barracks with a single open room offering zero privacy. But during the long months on cattle drives, they slept under the stars, on the cold ground, regardless of weather conditions. Rain, snow, or hail. You were still sleeping outdoors with minimal protection. Imagine months without a proper bed, bathroom, or change of clothes. The psychological toll was immense. Cowboys endured extreme social isolation, spending months away from any semblance of civilization. No family, no friends outside the crew, no relief from the constant demands of the job. Their entire existence revolved around cattle and survival. This isolation took a heavy toll on their mental health, though this aspect rarely makes it into our sanitized cowboy narratives. All this sacrifice and suffering came with meager financial rewards. The average cowboy earned just $25 to $40 monthly, equivalent to about $600 to $1,000 in today's money, less than factory workers of the same era made. What's more, the work was often seasonal, offering no job security or benefits. Once the cattle reached their destination, there was no guarantee of further employment. To survive in this profession required extraordinary skills, expert horsemanship, precise roping techniques, and an intimate understanding of cattle behavior. These weren't innate abilities. They took years of practice and learning, often through painful trial and error. The idea that anyone could just saddle up and become a cowboy was pure fantasy.
The economic rise and fall. How capitalism created and killed the cowboy.
Those incredible skills that took cowboys years to master. They became virtually worthless overnight when America's economic priorities shifted. The cowboy profession rose and fell in just 2 decades, a historical blink, yet somehow transformed into our most enduring national symbol the moment real cowboys became economically irrelevant. The American cowboy didn't emerge from some timeless tradition. It was born directly from post-Civil War capitalism. In 1866, the economics were suddenly irresistible. Cattle worth just a few dollars in Texas could fetch up to $40 per head in northern markets. This massive price gap created an entire profession almost instantly. Suddenly, ranchers needed skilled workers who could move thousands of cattle across hostile terrain without losing too many along the way. But the first attempts were disastrous. That initial 1866 cattle drive to the nearest railhead failed completely when local farmers, terrified of Texas cattle fever, blocked the herds and forced sales at rock-bottom prices. The following year changed everything. Abilene, Kansas established a railroad shipping facility specifically for cattle in 1867, creating the first viable pathway to get Texas beef to hungry northern cities. The economic machine was now in motion. By 1877, places like Dodge City became genuine boom towns, shipping an astonishing 500,000 cattle in a single year. Think about what that number meant in practical terms. Thousands of cowboys constantly moving enormous herds across the plains, all to satisfy the growing appetite for beef in America's urban centers. But the same capitalist system that created these jobs was already developing technologies to make them obsolete. The expansion of railroads deeper into cattle country gradually shortened the required drives. Why pay cowboys for months of work when you could load cattle onto trains much closer to where they grazed? Each new rail line made the traditional long-distance cattle drive less necessary. Then came barbed wire, a simple invention that completely transformed the landscape. Suddenly, the open range could be cheaply divided and controlled. Large landowners and corporations quickly recognized they could maximize profits by fencing in vast territories, keeping their cattle contained and eliminating the need for constant supervision on the range. Nature delivered the final blow to the open range system. The winter of 1886 to 1887, known as the Big Die-Up, brought devastating conditions that killed countless cattle across the Great Plains. Herds that had grazed freely with minimal investment were decimated overnight. Corporate interests seized on this catastrophe as proof that the open-range approach was too risky. The future would belong to fenced ranches with controlled breeding and feeding, operations that required far fewer cowboys with different skills. Fascinatingly, the very moment cowboys began disappearing from the actual landscape, they started proliferating in American imagination. Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show began presenting a romanticized version of cowboy life, transforming these former laborers into heroic figures embodying supposedly timeless American values. Dime novels featuring cowboy adventures sold by the millions. A profession that had barely existed was being mythologized before the last real practitioners had even found new jobs. This wasn't accidental. The sanitized cowboy image served powerful commercial and political interests. Rather than portraying cowboys as working-class laborers systematically replaced by corporate efficiency, popular culture reimagined them as rugged individualists whose way of life represented the very essence of American character. The economic exploitation at the heart of the cowboy story conveniently disappeared. The rugged cowboy myth persists in our American imagination not by accident, but by design. What we've uncovered is a systematic transformation, a rewriting of history that serves specific cultural and political interests. The cowboy, once a diverse and exploited laborer, became the ultimate symbol of American rugged individualism precisely when powerful interests needed such a symbol. This pattern extends beyond cowboys. Think about how we romanticize miners, factory workers, and other blue-collar professions. We celebrate their heroic spirit while conveniently forgetting the harsh realities they faced. This mythologizing often happens immediately after these workers' economic usefulness declines, a curious timing that should make us suspicious. The cowboy myth gained particular strength after the Civil War, when America desperately needed unifying symbols. By stripping away the diversity, labor exploitation, and economic realities, the cowboy became a blank canvas for projecting American values, especially those that benefited the powerful. So next time you encounter an American icon, ask yourself, whose interests does this myth serve? What economic realities are being obscured? And most importantly, whose stories were erased to create this sanitized version of history? The true power of understanding cowboys isn't just correcting history, it's developing the critical lens to question how all our cultural narratives are constructed.